has prepared a little bit to talk about the history of this story. So, thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Let's take this back up here. All right, so I've got pages and pages of notes. I hope you'll all be entertained. As Brian mentioned, he talked about the Hanukkah and the 8 lights. Most people are at least a little bit familiar with the idea of the Hanukkah festival, how we light one candle at one lamp on the 8 branch menorah for each day of the feast. And so at the final, on the last day, we get 8 candles. And there's a legend behind that about how when the temple was cleansed after the Greeks were kicked out of Jerusalem, there was one cruse of oil found. And that one cruse of oil that would normally last for 1 day, it lasted for 8 days, and that's the miracle of Hanukkah. And just what Brian said, whether or not that story is literally true, there's a lot of debate, and I don't really think that's all that important. But there are a lot more details in the history of Hanukkah, and there are a lot more significant miracles that were true. And if you've read, the story comes from the books of the Maccabees, a little bit from Josephus, a little bit from the Talmud, all these sources combined. And it's a long, complicated story of intrigue and religious conflicts and all these personalities, betrayal and promises. I'm not going to bore you with all that. I'm going to try not to. So I don't really have pages and pages of notes. I only have 2. So let me give you a little bit of background. Between the Persian conquest of the land of Israel and the Roman conquest, there's Alexander the Great. We all heard of Alexander the Great. He conquered the largest empire known to man at the time. And the land of Israel, or the province of Judea, was one of his early conquests in Asia. He was fairly friendly to the Jews. He allowed them to keep their religion, practice it however they wanted, as long as they also paid taxes and allowed Greeks to come and live in the land and practice their religion. So everybody got along. The Jews had lived in Persia and Assyria, in Egypt, and they had been persecuted everywhere they went. They were persecuted in their own land by their own conquerors. And when Alexander and his empire seemed so friendly, and the Greeks brought their philosophy and science, they seemed so enlightened. And many of the Jews thought, these people are so much better than all of those other people who have conquered us and caused us problems. Is it really so bad if we, build a gymnasium in Jerusalem so we can be like the Greeks? If we adopt a little bit of their culture, incorporate their philosophy into our own religion? Is that really such a bad thing? And for a long time, it didn't seem to be. It was probably 100 years before things really started to go off the rails. When Alexander died, his empire was divided up into 4 smaller empires, still significant. And one of each of those empires was ruled by one of his generals. And the general Seleucus, that kept the territory of Syria and what we know as Babylon in Persia, one of his descendants was named Seleucus IV. And he started to change the policies that the Greeks had always had. He increased the taxes. He started pushing Hellenization much more. He didn't outlaw the religion of the Jews, but he sent tax collectors, and one tax collector in particular who went into the temple saw all this gold and silver and got some ideas in his head. He stole all of the gold and silver from the temple, brought it back to Antioch, the capital of the Seleucid Empire, and then killed the emperor and tried to set himself up. Well, the emperor's brother heard about this and came back to town and decided that he wanted all that gold and silver, so he killed that guy and he took over as the emperor. And this was a guy known as Antiochus IV. You might have heard of it as Antiochus. His name is pronounced differently. Antiochus started calling himself Antiochus Epiphanes. So he started thinking of himself as God on earth. And his peers in other empires, other politicians, started calling him Antiochus the Mad. Because even among all of the other empires and the corrupt governments of the world, he was considered a madman. Some of the things that he did, he killed the general that had taken over the empire. He killed his own nephew, who was the heir of the throne. He raised the taxes to extremely high levels because he had to pay tribute to Rome, he had to finance all these other wars that he had going on. He outlawed all native religions in all of the lands that he had conquered. So Jews were no longer allowed to practice their own religion. They were required to worship the Greek gods. He replaced the high priest with a political appointee, a guy named Yehoshua in Hebrew, or Joshua. He started calling himself Jason, which was a Greek name because he was so fond of the Greek way of life. Another high priest who was a political appointee, Menelaus later, he killed the legitimate high priest, Yohanan, which is Hebrew for John. Antiochus was involved in wars on every front, in the Mediterranean, in Egypt, in Persia, and so the taxes in Judea kept getting higher and higher. He had more and more need of gold. There was a rumor one time when he was off in Egypt fighting one of the other heirs of Alexander's kingdom, that he had been wounded and killed later, that he had died from his wounds. So there was a great celebration in Jerusalem, and people decided now is the time to throw off the yoke of the Seleucids. So there was a big rebellion in Jerusalem. He heard about it, and on his way back to Antioch, his own capital, he passed through Jerusalem, killed thousands of Jews, enslaved many thousands more, and then he looted the temple again. This time he took all of the donations, all of the gifts that had been given to the temple in order to care for widows and the poor in the land, to help rebuild the articles that had been stolen before. He forbade performing the sacrifices in the temple. He forbade keeping the Sabbath in God's appointed times. He burned Torah scrolls. He outlawed reading of the prophets or the Torah. If you were caught with a Torah scroll, you would be killed. He outlawed circumcision and eating in a biblically clean manner. He and his Syrian soldiers went from town to town in the province of Judea, forcing people to make sacrifices to the Greek gods, forcing the elders of the towns to eat pork. They figured if the elders would do it, then all the other people would follow along. In one of those towns, there was an old man named Eliezer. He was about 90 years old. Antiochus was there personally, and he said, "You eat just one mouthful of pork, and we will leave this town, and we'll be done here. That's all we want." Antiochus refused. So he said, "Okay, just put it to your lips, pretend like you're eating it." Antiochus refused again. So, the old Eliezer, not Antiochus. So Antiochus was just enraged. So he had him killed right then. He went to another town where there was a woman named Hannah who had 7 grown sons, mostly grown, but some of them were grown, some weren't. Antiochus had all 7 of her sons tortured and killed one after another in front of their whole family, in front of the whole town. They were dismembered, burned alive, tortured in every way they could think of. But none of them would participate in the sacrifices or eat pork. And Antiochus thought this was the craziest thing ever. These Jews are insane. They just won't do anything reasonable. And the woman Hannah had 1 son left. And Antiochus said to her, "Why don't you go and reason with him? You don't want to lose your last son." So she said, "Okay, I will talk to him." So she goes to her son and she whispers to him, "Don't disappoint me. All of your brothers have been faithful to God. They all died terrible deaths. But God created this entire universe. He created Antiochus. And everything you see is just temporary. If you die today, I will see you again with all of your brothers. If you give in, you will die, and I will never see you again. So she went back to Antiochus, and she said, he just won't listen. So Antiochus said, I'll give you umpteen piles of gold and silver if you just reject your God and worship ours. And this young man, probably a teenager, he laughed at him, and he said, all of the suffering that you can do to me will last just a minute, or a few minutes, but then I'll have eternity in the arms of my God. You, on the other hand, you worship these false gods who can't do anything for you, and you will be known as an abomination forever. And so Antiochus killed him, and then his mother. On the 25th of Kislev, Antiochus made a law. Well, he had already made the law. He went back to the temple in Jerusalem. He set up an idol of Zeus in God's temple and sacrificed a pig on the altar. And this was pretty much the last straw for the faithful Jews. There was a small town near Jerusalem called Modi'in. There was an elder Levite there. He was a priest. His name was Matityahu, or Matthew. Some of Antiochus' men, Antiochus himself wasn't there, but the Syrian soldiers went to Medellin and said, Matityahu, you are a respected elder in all of Israel. You will sacrifice to our gods, and then we'll have peace, finally. But he refused. And then what the book of Maccabees, I think it's in 1 Maccabees, calls a certain Jew, which means that they didn't want anybody to remember his name. A certain Jew volunteered, says, I'll do it. I'll go sacrifice to your gods. And he started walking up to the altar, and Matityahu, even though he was an old man, he picked up his spear and killed him, right there in front of everyone. And immediately, his sons and all of the men in that village picked up arms and attacked the Syrian unit that was there. They chased the Syrians off, but they knew that a greater force was coming, so they had to go and hide in the hills. And Matityahu called all of the faithful men in the entire country to come join him out in the wilderness, and this was the beginning of the Maccabean revolt. They traveled around the country, visiting small villages, recruiting and destroying pagan altars as they went. But Matityahu was an old man, and so he appointed his son Judah to lead in his stead. And he died shortly after the rebellion began. And Judah is the one who we know now as Judah Maccabee. It means the hammer. Nobody's quite sure exactly why, but we can use our imagination. He started killing the Syrian soldiers in everywhere where there was foreigners in Israel practicing a pagan religion and Jews who were helping him. He was killing them and driving them out of Israel. Antiochus sent a general named Apollonius to capture him and bring him back. But instead, Judah killed Apollonius, destroyed his entire force, and took his sword as a trophy. Some of the legends say that it was actually an angel who came and fought that battle and presented a sword to Judah. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But Antiochus sent force after force, each one larger than the one before. And each time, God gave them the victories. Now, whether or not the people could see those angels, or whether the Syrians could see those angels, I have no doubt that they were there. It's the same thing that happened with Hezekiah and with other times when Israel's entire existence was threatened by foreign armies. God often sent angels. You remember when Joshua was facing the biggest army that they had ever fought when he came into Canaan. A man appeared to him, and Joshua says, whose side are you on? And he says, I'm not on anybody's side except God's. And then he revealed to him that he was the commander of all of God's armies. And in God's armies, the angels were there to fight the battles for him. And it was the same thing for the Maccabees. They fought for about a year until they had driven out most of the pagans from Israel. And on that exact same day, the 25th of Kislev, they had rebuilt, they had a new menorah, they had a new showbread table. It wasn't as glorious as the one before. It was, lesser metals. It was not as pure gold. But they did the best they can because all of the gold had been stolen. But on that exact same day, 1 year after Antiochus had sacrificed a pig on the altar, Judah dedicated a new altar. They had destroyed the old one because it had been desecrated by the blood of the pig. So on the 25th of Kislev, they began the dedication. The dedication went for 8 days. And the Talmud and other sources say that when they were preparing for this, they found a single cruse of oil that had been consecrated by a true priest. There was other oil around, but the priests that had been serving were political appointees, not true priests. So the priests that had served before Antiochus came, there was one cruse of oil hidden away, and that's what they used to light the menorah, and God made that one container of oil last for 8 days. When Antiochus heard that they had rededicated the temple and driven all of his soldiers out of Judea, he didn't charge back and try to take it. He just died. He was done. God had used him for his purposes, and the Jews were free again in their own land. But that wasn't the end of the story of the Maccabees or the liberation of the Jews. They continued to be persecuted in all of the surrounding lands, in the land of Edom, in the territory of the Ammonites, and the Philistines, and the Phoenicians. And so Judah, and later his brother John, started invading these other places to free the Jews who lived there. And they expanded the borders of the province of Judea to almost the complete area that King David had ruled before. They captured Galilee and much of the Transjordan. The war continued with the Seleucid Empire and with the Ptolemies, and later even with Rome. Israel didn't see a lot of peace. But all of these wars and the rebuilding of the temple, the cleansing of, or the rededication of a new altar, all of these things were done so that the stage could be set for Yeshua to come. You know, Judah and his brothers, they weren't perfect people. Just like the new menorah and the showbread table and the altar that they built, they weren't perfect, they weren't as good as what they had before, but they worked with what they had. And these things were recognized by Yeshua and the apostles, who all went to the temple and participated in the worship there. So these weren't things that God had rejected, because these men did the best they had with what they could. Judah was not the Messiah, but he was a foreshadowing of the Messiah. Not the suffering servant that we saw in Yeshua, but the conquering king, who we have yet to see, but we know will come. Yeshua, again, of course. So coming back to the 8 days, 8 in Scripture often represents new beginnings. You know, each week is a cycle of 7 days, and the 8th day is the start of a new week. A Hebrew slave serves for 7 years. He's released in the 7th year so that he can start a new life in the 8th. The Shemitah cycle, the 7-year cycle where every 7th year is Sabbath for the land. On the 8th year, everything starts anew. And the dedication of the priesthood and the altar takes 8 days, because on the 8th day, you now have a fully consecrated priesthood and altar ready to serve again. And just like Judah was a shadow of the Messiah yet to come, that dedication of the altar and the temple is a shadow of what God does in us. We are all imperfect, just like Judah and his brothers, and just like the earthly tabernacle and the temple. Things go wrong. They're made of perishable stuff. And when things go wrong, God gives us forgiveness and a way to restart. Our temple, each one of us, we are like God's temple on earth, and we have this continuous cycle in our own lives. We fall, we make mistakes, we become corrupted, our own temples are defiled. But God gives us forgiveness in that 8th day, just like at Hanukkah, just like at that dedication. is a process of cleansing that stuff, getting out the defilement from our lives, so that we can, every time, get a little bit closer, a little bit better with God. And eventually, when that true Messiah returns and restores everything to the way it's supposed to be, we will be perfected. And that's all.